I'm Matt Landau from VRMB, and this is Unlocked, Season 6, Magic Zones. This episode's brought to you by Point Central, the leader in smart home automation, and Breezeway, a property care and operations platform. Now, I've been interviewing vacation rental professionals and researching best practices now for the better part of 10 years, and Jed Stevens is one of the most advanced managers I have ever come across. He's someone whose success in building two sustainable and profitable firms in Kauai and Newport Beach is rivaled only by his ability to explain it all, step by step. Jed's use of pro formas and organizational charts and financial reporting shines a light on a challenge many long-standing vacation rental professionals suffer from: messy growth. In this interview, Jed and I walk through the 6 steps to building a strong foundation, pretty much all the stuff that can and should be considered before investing your next dollar or hiring your next employee. And if our conversation sounds too deep or specific for you, that's okay. It's not my strength either. But as we learn, it's not rocket science. Laying out your plan clearly is akin to finding your magic zone, that sweet spot that generates the income you want or need and the lifestyle you deserve. After this interview, I don't think I can unhear a lot of Jed's advice. It is well worthwhile to consider. Okay, let's go. I'll take any chance, Mr. Stevens, to talk about the dentist. You just came off of, your 8th root canal?
I'd say it's probably closer to 12. I stopped counting.
12?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm feeling very fortunate. And when I normally ask people how they're doing, you're doing well and you're back to work. You don't need any time off after this. You're like a veteran now.
The thing is, when you've had as many as I've had, you start realizing that it's not an opportunity for an excuse, and you've really got stuff you got to get done no matter whether you just gotten out of the dentist chair or not. So instead of going back home and relaxing for the rest of the day, I got back to work and was back to work by lunch, unfortunately.
And for those who don't know Jed, he's been a member of the Inner Circle now for a number of years, and he's always in there sharing his wisdom. But he also sent me a note, I'd say like 4 months ago or something. And if I'm not mistaken, you basically said like, hey, Matt, I've been building my vacation rental management business in both Kauai and in California. And I've been documenting how to do it. And I'm curious if you'll give me some thoughts. And you sent it over and I read it and I responded. I was like, this is the most complete explanation of how to read a vacation rental management growth guide that I have ever seen. And you said, well, that's only the first module. And my first question for you is, why do you think this way? Like, what's your background that makes you think in comprehensive systems and processes?
First of all, thank you for that. I appreciate the note of confidence there. I do it as a matter of course, and that probably comes from my background in engineering. I've actually got a mechanical engineering degree, and I'm a licensed and certified professional mechanical engineer. And that's what I did kind of in my pre-vacation rental business days. Everybody seems to have a first phase of life, and that's my first phase. So coming from that area where I did product development and I did lots of, I was responsible for lots of engineering systems and trying to figure out how these different ecosystems of a company that I was working with or a product fit together.
What kind of company was it?
I started out at a company that did jet fuel filtration, and I was brought on to create a line of sensing equipment and ended up building a line of sensing equipment for that company. And then I moved back to California and worked for about 10 years with a company that, of all things, did automatic control valves for waterworks systems. And so I was in charge of the research and development and then, electronic products line. And then moving forward into that, the engineering systems and lots of stuff at that company kind of had my fingers in a lot of pies.
Well, those sound like 2 very easy jobs, I must say. I sound like I could do that just overnight. But they also sound like 2 complex systems. And one of the things I learned relatively recently is that you have simple systems and you have complex systems. And simple systems pretty much depend on one variable. And complex systems depend on a whole bunch of variables. So you need to think like much deeper about how you're going to go about solving them. So when you put together this outline, and it's basically the 6 steps that you've used to build a sustainable vacation rental management company, are you thinking in terms of like the common denominator across both your destinations and potentially other destinations?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when I think about things, I don't necessarily try to boil them down to the common denominator across all things. I'm not trying to recreate Einstein's string theory here that binds and unifies all life. I'm not quite that ambitious. I kind of know my place in the world. But what I do think about is when I'm confronted with an issue or I'm trying to solve a problem, I think about how can I solve this in the most sustainable way that will not tie me to this position or this role or this task forever. And one of the things that I learned early on in the product development world was that if you design a system around yourself, you make yourself an integral part of that system. Number one, it works in the short term to make you indispensable. You're very valuable to whatever area that is, but also it traps you there. So very early on, my goal became to obsolete myself out of any process that I either created, product I created, or system that I was involved in, knowing that there will come a time when it's more important for me to be somewhere else solving some other problem because I don't want to be executing the solution for this problem forever. So that, if there is a common denominator, Matt, that's probably what it is, in that I'm always looking to figure out the best way to solve a problem and the way that it will not require me to be the one doing the work forever.
And I love your use of sustainability in that sense. When people hear it, sometimes they think exclusively environmentally friendly businesses, but sustainability is about building something that lasts. And why I think you have such a superpower in this industry is that you bring one huge weakness. You bring the strength in an area where many other managers have a weakness, and that is the ability to create processes and to delegate, whereas so many vacation rental entrepreneurs do kind of build themselves into the machine, and when you pull them out, the machine falls apart. So, with that said, listeners, if you're not excited about today's conversation by now, I don't know when you will be. We're going to go through these 6 steps or stages that Jed documented about his own vacation rental business. And in each of these stages, you're going to hear Jed's anecdotes, ways in which he was able to pull something off, with the hope that you can kind of apply it to your destination. And the 6 main steps are market analysis, building blocks, structural members, routines and procedures, interior design, aka classing up the joint, and lastly, marketing and sales. And these kind of represent, Jed, correct me if I'm wrong, the main pieces of how you have gotten to where you are at today.
Yeah, absolutely. And what it really came out of was when the pandemic happened, our company is located on Kauai, and Kauai had some of the most restrictive quarantines that in the world. I mean, to date, we're recording this in early May. To date, Kauai has had less than I think it's 310 cases from the beginning of the pandemic. So they closed the borders, closed everything up tight, and that also meant the travel stopped to the island. Nobody was coming in, nobody was going out. And so it required us to pivot a little bit in our thinking and think, okay, how do we survive this? And how do we come up with another option? So it's not like I had all this stuff just sitting around and I had, created this rubric as I was creating my company and all that kind of stuff. This whole exercise came about and, I ended up sending it over to you saying, hey, do you think this is interesting at all? Because we ended up starting up a second business in Southern California. And in doing that, I kind of uncovered all of the systems and all of the things that I had done the first time around, leveraged that, and thought, I'm going to write this down a little bit more formally while we're here. So that's kind of where we got to where we are.
And I always like to think that explaining something is a completely different challenge than actually doing it really well. And you happen to be good at both of them. So let's start with the first chapter or module, which you call market analysis. And I kind of call it figuring out if you've got something here.
Absolutely.
Like, is your idea about building a vacation rental business viable? And it kind of starts off with a bit of research, right? What are the main pieces of research that are necessary to do up front?
Well, I think that, it all kind of starts with the dream, right? You're sitting there saying, is this something that can actually work? My first forays into vacation rental management started while I was on a trip in Poipu, and was looking at housing prices, and we were staying at a vacation rental, so I started thinking it through. And from that point, you've got this idea, this kernel of a business that you're thinking about. There's a lot of holes you got to fill in to where you get to the point where you said, do we actually have something here? So, I mean, the first one is, location. You got to know about your location. You got to understand what are the features of my location that attract people here. Who are the kinds of people who want to come in? All of those types of things. Is this actually a vacation rental destination? I mean, you can have a really good destination that isn't necessarily a vacation hotspot. So that's going to have a different focus. Not saying that you can't find a good market there, but it all starts with understanding the physical location that you're going to be, because if you're a destination that people are going to travel to for any reason, you need to know what those reasons are. So that's number one.
And I think if people are trying to start somewhere, a good place to start is a destination you really like. Mm-hmm. Like, if you really love your destination, it's going to show, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
Like, if your destination is not your favorite place to be, or like in the case of unfair regulation or adverse regulation situation, your guests aren't going to want to be there either, because it's just not a welcoming environment, right?
Absolutely. It's got to be some place that you've got some passion for, because whether you realize it or not, you are tying yourself to this place. So it's got to be a place you're comfortable in.
And your use of pro formas in this document is really important to me, because I think a lot of businesses start off without, in our space, start off without a pro forma. Explain the importance of that as you map things out.
Absolutely. So a pro forma is basically a time-based analysis of a business's projected growth and or income over time. So what that boils down to is, once you've done all your research about what the rental rates are, whether regulations are going to be a problem, what is the competition charging for their services and things like that, you've got your basics of what the business is going to look like. You take that all and you build out of that a financial model of what your business is going to look like, either on a monthly or an annual basis, to try and get an idea. Going back again, the whole point of this first research section is, does this make sense? And you can opt out at any point, and you only get to the next stage by passing through it and saying, okay, yes, this makes sense. So if you do a financial model that gives you the ability to say, here's what my income is, here's what my expenses are, and here's what's left, profit, the important thing.
I love how your pro forma, it includes, like, the sample includes all the income streams and expenses that you're experiencing, but you also have all these other ones that could potentially be inserted, so that everybody can kind of plug and play, piece together ultimately their own secret sauce.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's the thing. Most of what I put together is a template for, it's creating your own thought experiment out of the basics, the basic scaffolding that we've got here. So the idea is that here's some of the things that I ran into. Hopefully you'll look at that and go, oh, cool, I forgot to think about that one. Or, this is not something I'd considered yet. Or, okay, this is all good, but I know I need to add X, Y, and Z, because in my area, X, Y, and Z is a fundamental part. So you take that financial model and then you look at that over time. That's how you get your pro forma. And your pro forma tells you, how are you going to be able to grow the company over time? Is there a point at which you will stop investing money in the company and start making money in the company? What point is that? Can you make it there? Then you've got, a growth phase that you can build into there, where you recognize, okay, now once we hit this particular mark, then we can afford to do some cooler things, which will, at least in theory, accelerate our growth. And you work that over and you get to see, this is something that in X amount of time, say 12 months or 24 months, I'm going to have a return on my investment of X, Y, and Z. It gives you the ability to not only kind of map that out, at least a roadmap, but it gives you the ability to understand what the different players and things in your market and how they're going to affect your business over time. And that's as important at this stage, Matt, than knowing, or at least having a roadmap. It's getting a sense for, how is this potential regulation going to affect me in the long term? Or I'm looking at vendor X versus vendor Y. X has got a flat rate, Y's got a proportional rate. Which one do I go with?
And you can change it. Like, it's not completely fixed, right?
Absolutely. You're not building a model out of clay that you can't go back and, remove one of the arms and put it on the other side of the body. This is it's a living document that you get to remake as often as you need to. In the early stages, I would play with these financial calculators almost daily, trying to move it around. This doesn't look good here. Maybe I need to charge that. Or what if I were to go after this kind of home instead of this kind of home, and that would get me this much money? And you play with it pretty constantly in the early stages to try and test your theories out and see, does this make sense?
And in this market analysis segment, talk to me about the kinds of vacation rental sort of genres, or I don't know what to call them, market segments.
Those would be market segments. It's kind of planning out. Once you've done your basic performas and you're kind of starting to get your legs under you, you can start to decide, okay, what position in the market? Maybe I call it market positioning. I'm not exactly sure. But the idea here is that, are you going to go after ultra luxurious homes, beachfront, waterfront, ski lift, ski in, ski out kind of places? Or are you going to be more middle of the road? Or are you going to go for places that are just the economy? Because there's a market in all these places. And it's not wrong to say, I really want to focus on the economy ones, or I really want to focus on the ultra luxurious ones. The point of this exercise at this stage is to figure out, okay, if I'm going to go after an ultra luxurious model home, and that's going to be the place I operate, am I prepared to build in all of the things that it's going to take to do that well? With the understanding that, you're not going to be able to automate things as much for an ultra luxe home, because the homeowners are going to expect a certain level of personal service, and your guests are going to expect a personal level of service that you can't automate those things.
What did you settle on in Kauai, and what was the strategy as you began to build? Because I know starting with 0 properties is one thing. You're in a completely different phase when you've got, let's say, 5, and ultimately as you head towards 50, you're in a different mode.
I'm an engineer, right? So I chose the bell curve model, and I looked at that and said, there are ultra high end, there are ultra low end, but there's certainly a whole lot in the middle. And it made sense for us, and it made sense for us to do it that way, because I'm not an ultra high luxury person. I drive a Honda. I live in Newport Beach, California, which is on the upper end of that spectrum, but we live in what we like to call entry level Newport Beach, which is, houses built in the 50s, normal neighborhoods and stuff like that. So I don't identify myself as an ultra high end individual. And I also don't identify myself as, as an ultra economy person. I'm kind of right there in the middle, working class people. And those are the people I relate to the best, the people who have had to kind of earn their place and earn their way in life. And those are in all honesty, those are the kind of homeowners that I want to be interfacing with, because we share a similar background, we share similar values, and they appreciate the value of good service, and they're not unreasonable when they get good value. So for us, that made some sense to me on kind of a, on a very basic level. But then you also look at the market, and in any given market, you're going to have, like I said, a slice of really high end, a slice of really low end, but you've got an awful lot in the middle that gives you a really good chance of finding the number that you need to survive.
And so when you start off, like in Kauai, what's the difference between acquiring one at a time at the beginning to kind of hitting the accelerate button?
Probably, it's the confluence of experience and process. So the more experience you've got, the easier it gets. The easier it gets, the more you get. And the more you get, the more momentum you build.
I love that. Have you ever said that before to anybody?
No, I didn't. I haven't.
That sounds like something that you should tell your kids, and they'll be like, I have no idea what Dad's talking about. But one day they will.
maybe if they listen. That's the thing. They've got to be able to hear me before they can take away that.
No, I love that little logic chain. Okay, go on.
So anyway, our approach has changed over time, obviously. So at the very beginning, we weren't able to attract any customers. I won't bore you with the whole plan, but we did our research, we got our licenses, we got hooked up with a broker, and we were going to be working with a partner out there in Kauai who kind of knew the area, had contacts. So for me, marketing and getting owner relationships was not something I emphasized at the beginning because we had that covered with our partner. The day that we got our brokerage relationship cemented and settled, no joke, on the ride back from that business lunch where we got that deal made, our partners looked at us and said, we don't want to do this. We're good. We're going to back out.
Wow.
And so, we're 6-8 months in, we've gotten real estate licenses in Hawaii now. And all of a sudden we've got no way to develop business.
Did you have a feeling that they had, or was it completely out of the blue?
I wasn't that surprised by it, to be completely honest.
Okay.
I was hoping that they'd stick in it long enough for us to be kind of introduced to the right people and be kind of accepted by the community.
Right.
Ultimately, that didn't happen. So, so we had to learn how to do it. And in doing that, we came up with a lot of different scenarios and a lot of different strategies to break in. Some of them we can talk about in a different forum where it's I've got a little bit more time to expound, but we tried a lot of things. We got real creative, and we ended up coming up with some different ways of looking at the situation in order to get our foot in the door. And once we got our foot in the door, that allows you to have some credibility. It allows you to have some experience, and then a little bit more comes from that. Once you get a few people that you're working with or managing for, you can start to talk about your experience. You can start to talk about, how good of a job you're doing in ways that, give others confidence that it's going to start working.
Social proof.
Yeah, exactly. And then once you get more of that, then if you go after that in a very specific way, you can leverage the little that you've got to get more. And that's where I say, the momentum starts to build from there.
So you talk about licensing. I want to move into the second module here, building blocks,
sure,
which I think of as, I love this this building your dream home analogy that you use throughout this guide. And this is the part about like literally preparing to build the home. You've done the research, but now you're actually getting sort of your ducks in order. You're hiring the right people. Talk to me about beyond just licensing and the formation of a corporation, which we have to do because this is a real business. Talk to me about the role of an organizational chart, because I feel like this is a pivotal piece of your puzzle.
This is it goes back to what we talked about earlier, where you start to envision this company as something larger than just one person. I remember, I will give your podcast's credit for this early on. And I forget who you were talking with, but it was the concept of create an org chart, even if you're every seat in the org chart at the moment. And what that does is
CJ.
I think it was CJ. And I also took away another gem from that one that has to do with how you create your company files, in a very logical manner that has benefited us greatly. So I think that was the same podcast.
Listeners, if you want to find that interview that Jed's referring to with CJ, it's episode 47, titled The Force Field.
In either case, when you get to this point where, like you said, you've got your licenses taken care of, you've got your formation of the entity, whether it's an LLC or an S corp or sole proprietorship or whatever that it happens to be, you need to start looking at your company as not just a one-man shop, but this is how things would run in a quote real company. And that has different areas to it. It's got human resources, it's got marketing, it's got sales, it's got operations, it's got accounting, it's got finance, it's got all of those different legs. And you need to start identifying what those portions of your company are. And that filing system that I just mentioned, that I think it was CJ that suggested, really kind of forces you to think about, with every document that you put into your company filing system, where does this belong? Is this an HR document? Is this a vendor document that might go under operations, or maybe it goes under the financial aspects? It forces you and it trains you to think about things in an organizational manner, and prepares you for the time when it makes sense to bring somebody else on for some specific roles.
What I love about that, someone recently said to me with regards to a film project that we're working on, he said, budget it out as it should be done really well. Like if you had unlimited budget, just do it, like draw it up how it should be done in a perfect scenario. And that really gets you thinking differently than I've only got very limited resources right now. I can only do so much.
Right. And it takes you from the how can I get by mentality to how would this be done correctly mentality.
Love that.
And that's a pivotal change in mindset, because it sets you up for all of the things that you're going to need later on. So so the org chart is a huge portion of that. And especially early on when you're small, it's largely an exercise, but it's one of those things that you really don't want to skimp on just because it's all you.
So in this module, you also talk about stuff like bank accounts and insurance and domain names and stuff like that. But the theme here is that you need to be doing this properly, right? You can't just cruise in under the radar, because that's unsustainable.
It's not just unsustainable. It is going to make so much more unnecessary work for you later that you're not going to be in a position to handle, that it will likely cause you to have to fold your current operation. So think about it like this. It's like an angle, right? It's like a triangle. So if you're going to go straight along and you know what the right path is, but you're going to deviate early on, even knowing that you're going to end up at one spot, if you move in the wrong direction long enough, you could end up doubling your trek to get to the right area by deviating at the beginning. So if you think about how much time, how much work and energy it's going to take to fix it later versus fixing it now, I've always been a big proponent of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that's what this is. This is do it right from the beginning, or you probably shouldn't be doing it at all.
I was just talking to someone who was saying how keeping an extra set of light bulbs in their vacation home ended up being like 1/10 of the price that it cost them to otherwise send out an employee on the fly who was charging double the hourly rate, and the guest was annoyed. Like exactly what you just said. So it goes down to the minutia as well.
Was that me? Did we talk about the battery box?
No. It was Linda. It was Linda.
Okay, that's cool. Because we just put battery boxes, battery and light bulb boxes. When I was last on site, that was a project I took on this last time around because of that exact same thing. My maintenance guy called me a couple months ago. He goes, "Do you want to save all your owners a bunch of money?" And of course, I say, "Well, sure. How?" And so we talk through the process. Yeah. So it's very much that line of thinking. If you can do something right up front, it's going to save you in the end. And really, especially when it comes to, some of these things, if you don't do it right when you start in some places, it's not just that it could cost you some time and effort down the line. You might actually be breaking laws unless you know you're doing it right. So especially if your market is in a place where you've got real estate rules or you've got regulations that require you to do certain things, the moment you list a property, you are considered to be operating. So make sure up front that you're doing it the right way.
And if you, listener, are a planner type, that's like a huge advantage in this industry. And if you're not a planner type, know that this is something you're really going to need to work on, or hire somebody to work on for you, because the messier it gets, the harder it gets as we move forward. Moving into the third module, which you call structural members, comes right after building blocks. This is what you're in the dream house analogy you call raising the roof, but it's basically the tools that are needed to operate a successful vacation rental company. And at the beginning, I don't want to bore people with the long list of things that every business in the modern age should be using, like cloud storage and email server, et cetera. But I want to talk about the property management software aspect of your business. How do you explain the importance of that piece of the broader puzzle?
I can't imagine trying to operate a vacation rental management company without a proper property management software. It would be like trying to sail without a boat. It's just not something you can do. I mean, you can swim, right? But that's not sailing. You can surf, but that's also not sailing. You need to have the tools to be in the business, and that's you just can't do it without that in a professional, sustainable way. Because if you don't, then you're putting all the onus on your memory or your spreadsheets or some other system that is not going to be transportable to your next phase of business, or it's going to lock you into only being able to handle a certain number of properties, or it's going to be necessarily hampered by the number of hours that you can put into it in any given day, week, month, or year. So you just can't not do it and be professional at this level.
Explain to me how your pro forma that we talked about in market analysis dictates the property management software that you chose for your Kauai and your Southern California business.
Well, for us, it was evaluating the different options that were available at the time. I went through this first in 2015 when we started the Kauai business, and then again last year when we expanded into Newport Beach, and had to look at not only what was out there and what was available, but what would the systems do? What are they going to because each of the property management softwares out there have a different set of packages that include tools. Some of them you get web hosting, guest booking sites on the front end, as well as an operational back end. Some of them are just an operational back end. Some of them have all of these things all put together in a really usable format. Some are more powerful but less usable. And then some you have that have tried to build in every solution that you can get, including dynamic pricing, channel management, hospitality, like an operational platform. And so what we did is we sat down. At the time for us, the clear winner was LiveRes, and I'm happy that I went with them and have been happy to watch their growth over time. For us, it had enough of the stuff that I knew we needed from my operational background and my knowledge of what I was going to need to do this well. And it also had the promise at that point. It had the promise of bringing on new tools and attracting vendors with integrations that made sense to me, that minimized my workload. And not insignificantly at that point for me, Matt, there is a small monthly minimum, and then there's a percentage growth. So it scales with us without penalizing us for not being a big company. So depending on where you're starting from, you need to be keenly aware of how much this is going to cost you up front, and when will it get expensive, and when it gets expensive, can you afford it? So I know that there are some property management softwares out there. I've got some colleagues who I've spoken to, and it blew my hair back when I realized how much they were spending at a startup level just to have their PMS, which is totally powerful. It's great systems. I'm not going to talk about who this was or what that system was, but it shocked me to understand how much money they're spending on a PMS software at the stage of company they are. And that's one of those things that I really am concerned about in terms of sustainability. So scaling is important.
And the other aspect of what I loved about this structural members section as it relates to property management software is what I think of as the agile approach, together with Terry White on the heels of our latest Keystone Awards, which is, as you know, Jed, the deepest independent dive into property management software in our space. We decided to come up with a theme, which was staying agile and identifying all the things that the property management software that you have chosen does really well. And there are probably lots of them. They've matched your needs based on your pro forma, but also identifying and investigating holes.
Absolutely.
The areas that offering doesn't do something well, because we are very upfront about this. There is no perfect all-in-one solution that does everything best. So how did you handle that specifically with any given plugins in Kauai and in Newport Beach?
It's the same approach in both places, and I'm at different stages in both areas, if that makes sense. So, what we did was we evaluated, with LiveRes, does this fit enough of our needs? And I'd say when we started, it was probably 75, 80% complete. And I knew that there were some things that it didn't have that we'd need to partner with. Dynamic booking, LiveRes doesn't have an in-the-can solution for that. So I knew I'd need to get a partner. So I started researching. At that time, they didn't have an operational platform. They've developed one that we've used with some limited success, but I'm just about to sign on with Breezeway to help us manage our operations. The key is, though, that because LiveRes didn't offer those initial kind of, like, as you say, best solutions in the box, they had something that was workable for us for a time when it made sense, that didn't cost me any extra money. But I also knew, okay, when I get to a certain point, when I get to a pain point or an inflection point, maybe is the right word for it, I know what I'm going to go with, and I know who I'm going to go to get that. So, as tourism started coming back in Kauai, I realized, because we'd been able to bring on some new properties, that my guest book situation or my welcome emails and all of the information that I provided for guests, while it was great when we were smaller and it had some real personal attention to it, I also knew that it wasn't going to scale very well. So we went over to Rubaru to help us manage our guest book system. And I've had rave reviews from people, and I knew that was coming. So I got it started a couple of months before. But again, it's because I'd taken the time to analyze, where are my holes with what I've got, and what partners can I leverage from LiveRes's existing integration marketplace to fill those holes, and have done that with our data platform. With key data dashboards. I've done that with the guest books with Rubaru. Like I said, I'm working with an onboarding guy over at Breezeway, which free plug, and I appreciate that, because I was listening to one of your podcasts a couple of weeks ago, and I heard about the operational thing, and I went back and I said, oh, hey, by the way, I know Matt. Can we get that?
Nice. Did you get it?
So we're, yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Sweet. I got it.
$1,000. So I'll take my cut of
exactly.
that anytime you want.
Done. Yeah. We'll talk afterwards. And then beyond pricing too. So it's one of those things that I've known where the holes are, and I've been waiting for the right opportunity to fill them. But in order to be agile, I'm not going to spend that money up front. So I have been doing a lot of that work in the meantime, which means that now that I'm going to bring on the tool, I know how I need to implement it now, because I've been doing that work kind of manually in the meantime. Now I'm going to have a system for how that works, but it's going to be an informed system built off of what we need it to be.
Our interview with Eddie Gray, the housekeeping director at Newman Daily Resort Properties in Destin, Florida, was a really powerful one. And more specifically, Eddie's understanding of the way technology fits into a handmade hospitality enterprise was second to none. Here's first his opinion about Point Central, smart home automation, and how that fits within a streamlined business.
We went to keyless entry door locks, we use Point Central. So by having keyless entry, we give all of our guests a closing door code. So when that guest leaves that property and checks out, they must put a 6-digit closing code in that door. And when they do so, our corporate office reservations team get the notification, and all of my cleaning staff get the notification. So it could be at 4 a.m. and that housekeeper will get a text alert, the home boathouse has departed, for example. So now that cleaner has the option to wake up early to get a head start, or they can sit in and wait to checkout time. But most of our cleaners will wake up early and get out here to get to work. So the cleaner goes in and cleans the property. Then they put an exit door code in when they're done. After the cleaner puts their closing code in, then the inspector is notified of that property. Then that inspector knows, now it's my time to get to this home, get it inspected thoroughly, and ready for the next family coming in before check-in. So when that inspector does their process, they put a final closing code in, and that is called the completion code. Reservations department and front desk get that notification. Now they can call that family that has paid for early check-in, that wanted to be in before 4, that their property is ready. All those things have cut my time down of a communication of picking up the phone, making the phone call to the cleaner. Cleaner calls me when they're done. I call the inspector and say, inspector, now go to the property. Inspector does their job, then they pick up the phone and call me. So all those phone calls stopped.
If you'd like to do a demo with Point Central, head over to pointcentral.com/VRMB They're now taking on vacation rental managers with less than 25 properties, which is a complete game changer. Eddie's second comment was about our other sponsor, Breezeway, property care and operations platform. Here's how he described it.
I would actually make my schedule just with a pen and pad and a notebook and a printed departure schedule. And I would have to write these cleans down. And we average on a busy Saturday, 150 cleans in one day. I have some cleaners that will clean 3 properties to 20 properties. So I'm writing their name and all 20 units. Then I would have to text message them all those 20 that they have, and not just one crew. I would have to text message probably 40 crews to do 150 cleans in one day. And that was time. That was a lot of my time in that desk, in that office. Now with Breezeway, when they came about and we purchased that, invested in it, we were able to implement and add our checklist that we created into their software platform. We were also able to utilize Breezeway by putting property specific notes for certain properties. We have some homes where owners like certain knickknacks in certain places. We have some homes that require certain grill cleaning and certain things. Well, that inspector would have to remember those things or keep a notebook about this property. Now in Breezeway, every unit is specific and you can add these details about this home. And then the back end of that, it has a maintenance portal as well, cleaning portal, inspection portal, and a maintenance portal where you're able to communicate with all 3 departments that hone in, and that's the hub of the wheel for a vacation rental is housekeeping. So Breezeway had it all in one package where I could make a schedule, send it to my cleaner. The inspector can go out and do their job and check the home. Then if they find any maintenance, anything broken, a leak or toilet issue, we would submit those maintenance tickets over through Breezeway through the rental department. Then the rental manager will get the maintenance order and send out the maintenance vendor to fix the problem. So all those things are being taken care of with one software company, which is Breezeway.
If you'd like to do a demo with Breezeway and get free implementation valued at $1,000, head over to breezeway.io/VRMB. These 2 tools are complete game changers, and it's a pleasure to have them as sponsors. When they're organically brought up in the conversation with innovative owners and managers, that's when you know they're doing something awesome. Let's get back to the show. I don't want to get too deep, Jed, into your corporate accounting department because that is probably the least exciting
for everybody
subject matter.
For everybody. Sorry to all the accountants out there.
There, you do have a very comprehensive section, though. They'd be proud. Section 4 of this manual is what you call routines and procedures. And this is where I think you really shine. So talk about the KPIs and your philosophy on reporting as you've built these 2 destinations.
So KPIs, I think everybody probably understands, but for those who don't, KPI is a key performance indicator. And one of the benefits I think that I had coming into this industry was not only the fact that my workplace was 2,500 miles away and an ocean away and 3 hours away, but I was also somewhat insulated from the industry norms. So I came in and developed my own set of what I thought to be key performance indicators based on the kind of information I was bringing in, the analysis that I thought was interesting and meaningful in our business. And when I started working with the data service later, I really found that I didn't necessarily recreate anything, but I had created a really cool complement to some of that stuff. And I created those KPIs for us out of a need to explain how well our business was going so I could attract more business. So in the early stages, I was monitoring all of our first couple of properties worth of metrics and building out a monthly report that I put on a website. It's actually still a valid link on our website. I'm not going to say what it is because I haven't updated it in a few years, but I created a regular email that I sent out to all of the people that I'd been in touch with through some of my fledgling attempts at direct marketing, and created these KPIs and then displayed them and sent them to everybody that I talked to in order to show them on a regular basis, here's how we're doing versus whatever you're working with now. So that was a really cool kind of routine that I fell into and crafted in order to try and grow business. At the same time, since we were small, there are a lot of details to this business. For anybody who isn't yet in the business, I'm going to share a secret here, and I hope I don't offend anybody by saying this. It's not rocket science what we're doing here. It's not complicated. We're not putting a man on the moon. We're not diving to the bottom.
String theory.
Yeah, exactly. It's not quantum physics. It's not that. But it is a ton of small details. A ton of, and unfortunately, you mess up any of those small details and it's going to have an impact on somebody's vacation at some point. So you got to take them seriously. They're not insignificant details, but there are a ton of them. So based on my experience, I thought, what's the best way that I know of to make sure I'm hitting all these? And I started creating routine checklists for how I put together those KPIs, or how I display the KPIs to people, or, operational details like month-end closing. I've got a list that I've been working from, and I recreate it every month. And whenever I come across something where, I realize, I've done this 2 months in a row now and it's outside of my sheet, I'm going to update my template. So I update my template, so next time around it's there. It's that whole philosophy of continuous improvement. And there's a whole other section that I'm interested in with regard to this business that gets into that side of things. But the routines and procedures are an incredibly important part for the reliability and the high quality standard that is going to be expected by all of us in the coming years.
In this module, you go through the steps that are necessary to do your branding strategy, to create a website, to choose your channel distribution, your OTA selection as well.
Mm-hmm.
Any of that jump off the page to you with regards to Kauai or Newport Beach that were lessons learned in an interesting way?
I think that when it comes to Kauai and Newport Beach, they're definitely different markets. They're not the same. In Kauai, it's definitely a more of a locals place. There's an exclusivity there that is not about money. Whereas in Newport Beach, it's a hard place to be, because as I'm driving down the street in my Honda, I get passed by a Bentley, a Lamborghini, and a Ferrari, and it gets to the point where I don't even look at them that hard anymore because it's just everywhere. So it's a different type of strategy. So we ended up settling on, with the help of Vintori, who's our marketing partner and has been a huge source of support over the years, over the year, I guess it feels like years, just coronavirus being what it has been. We crafted specialized messages for each area. So in Kauai, we are going after, a vacation rental asset management approach where we help to illustrate to owners that we are looking to take their home and help them optimize it the way they want to succeed with their home.
So this is a branding strategy that's going to the homeowners.
Correct.
Got it. And then that's different from what you do to the guests?
Definitely, because they're two different markets.
Interesting.
So what it comes down to, and again, being that we're middle market, we know we're not ultra luxe. I've never pushed the concept of, you're going to have a super special handcrafted, hand knit, throw pillow for you when you get there for every one of our guests. But what we do bring to the table is we are incredibly proficient. We're responsive. We're efficient with the way that we do things. And there's a high level that we hold ourselves to in terms of those things. We found that most of our guests haven't expressed an appetite for wanting to get together with us and talk story. It's not about them wanting to experience us during their vacation. They want to get to their place and they want to get to their vacation. So we have built our business around making that process as easy, straightforward as possible. And then any questions they have, any communication needs they have, we do our best to, based on our experience, answer all those questions up front, or at least give them the place to go look for all those answers, so that when they have those questions, they can get them answered quickly. Or if it's something that has, seeped through the cracks, we can point them to the right question really quickly. So in terms of branding, we go for professionalism. We go for, being kind and responsive and all that. That's probably our defining feature.
And you also touch on association memberships. What do you like there?
The association memberships are something that it's really hard to get your head around when you're starting and there's little cash flow, but the people that you're going to learn from and the access to resources that you're going to get by working with the different association memberships are just invaluable. And I remember when I was considering going with Ventori, this was at the end of 2019, early 2020. I actually had a short call with CJ where he was talking to me about his experience with working with Ventori. And he said something that stuck with me, and it stuck with me in a more general sense than just working with Ventori. He said, look, you're going to get access to people and minds in this industry that you would never have access to if you were just working your way up. He said, if I were you, I would find a way to pay for this because it's going to be worth it in spades. And I think about that often because I had to find a way to pay for it, and it has been more worth it than I could have thought at that point. And I say that from the standpoint of an association membership. I look at our partnership with Ventori almost like an association membership, in that the resource that we've gotten out of it, in addition to them providing their specific service, which we'll get into at a different point, has been just remarkably invaluable.
And are you also like a member of VRMA, for instance?
Absolutely. And I actually, that was one of the trailing ones for me because it was it was a cost. So, but we are now, and it's, that's an important part of it too.
Let's move into our second to last, I would call it a chapter, but it's like a library unto itself. Interior design, AKA classing up the joint. What's this one all about? Like, how did you apply this?
It's really about, optimization. So when I think about an interior design, you've got all of your basic furniture in, you've got all of your room is built, your windows are in, your floor is in. Now you think, how can I optimize this?
You think that.
Sorry. Yeah. Well, I would say one might think, but you made the point that it's how I might think. So the idea here is to figure out how to take the basic things that you've gotten in place already and use them the best you can, and in that dream home analysis, or in the dream home analogy, it's is this piece of furniture under the right window, or do I need to move that painting over here? And with regard to your operation that you're running, when you're looking to optimize, you need to stand back a step and have a critical eye to things to say, is this thing that I'm doing in operations really an operational task, or do I need to move that over to, a finance task? Or, is this vendor relationship that I'm working with, is it really working for us, or do I need to investigate a different one? It's the moment where you step back and you say, okay, you look for pain points. I guess that's probably the best way to put it. You want to look for pain points and figure out, is there something that's not working well? Even it might be working well, but it's not working as well as you hoped it would. For you, there's an internal conflict there. It's the difference between your expectations and reality is your potential for conflict, as I like to tell my kids. That's another one they haven't picked up yet. But if you can do that, if you can stand back and say, all right, I'm going to be objective for a minute, and I'm going to look at this with, with a clear set of eyes, not from the founder perspective where it's my child and everything's perfect, but where could we improve here? That's where you have the ability to go back to some of those operational checklists and make improvements. And it's really the continuous improvement module within this set of, it's never done. You never decide you're going to put in shag carpeting in 1977, which was awesome at that point. And then look at it in 1995 or, 2021 and decide, yeah, that's still awesome. It's like, no, okay, it was great when it worked, but it doesn't work now. Let's figure out, maybe we need to put in hardwood floors now. So it's that ability to step back and to, take a look at all of these different facets of your organization and say, what's working and what isn't working.
And what I especially like about this is that it's the fifth part in 4 previous steps that need to come before it. So if you've done this the right way, the stepping back gives you an amazing kind of clarity. You're almost able to see what about your original pro forma, or your original org chart, or your tech stack, or your reporting? Which of those maybe need to be tweaked? And I love the way that you wield your dashboard. Like, explain that part, because I think everybody needs a good dashboard.
So the dashboard is a concept that I feel like people have been using as a buzzword for years now. I first came across the concept of a dashboard, 2015, 16, 17, sometime around then, when it became a big buzzword in technology circles of, you want to be able to look at something that shows a health indicator on all different facets of your business. And that obviously it comes from your car, right? You look at your car as you're driving down the road, and you've got you've got your speedometer. If it's, depending on what kind of car it is, it might have a tachometer, which tells you, speedometer tells you how fast you're going. Tachometer tells you how the engine is running, or at least what level the engine's running. And then you've got a bunch of other little lights: oil temperature, water temperature, air pressure in your tires, things like that. They give you a sense of the overall health of your car as you're operating it. And that's exactly what you want to try and build in your operations and in your company is, let's have a way to glance at the company to see, how are sales going right now? Are we getting the bookings that we expect to have? How are my growth numbers looking? Am I doing the things that I need to do? And am I getting the responses that I need to have from our marketing efforts to clients? What's our cash flow look like? How are we positioned to go into a shoulder season knowing that we're going to get less revenue? Are we going to be able to have enough to do some investment during that time to leverage that into a bigger peak season next year, that sort of thing. So if you have the clarity, once you've taken that step back to assess where things are at, you might also have the clarity to start putting some of these pieces in. And these dashboards, just like the financial models that we talked about earlier, they don't have to be set in stone. The nice thing is we're not talking about a 2015 Honda. We're talking about your operational dashboard. You can put in a new KPI if you think it's important. And if you've got one that's sitting there that you haven't referenced, you can take it out. But cultivating this concept of having a quick way to review things on a regular basis is just invaluable, because it gives you the ability to monitor the health of your operation in real time and make real-time changes as necessary.
And this is also where you touch on a feedback element. I like to think of it as a feedback loop, whether it's with your team or your property owners that you're representing, to get really honest feedback. And it can be anonymous, but to find those weak spots, to go back to your point of never stop improving, right?
That probably should have come at the very beginning of this section. And that is huge, because you're never going to get enough. As objective as we all are, you just can't be everywhere and see everything. So cultivating the attitude of wanting real feedback from the beginning, the importance of that can't be overstated.
What's something you've learned in that feedback loop experience from an owner or a team member in Kauai or Newport?
I've learned things from guests that I wasn't aware of. Sets of pillows that I thought were awesome that we picked out just didn't fly. So, you need to get different equipment sometimes. I've learned what guests really care about and what they don't really care about. Things like, how dusty a lamp is might be a huge deal to some people, but not to others. We use our guest reviews as a way to, not just monitor, is what we think is important, is that still working? And if it is, then great. But we also use it as a flagging system for, this person mentioned that the Wi-Fi was kind of spotty here. We might want to check on that. And then if I get a couple more in a certain proximity of time, then it's like, okay, it's risen to the level of being an actionable thing now. Now we need to attack that issue. Otherwise, it's going to cause us problems down the road, which will cause us reviews, which will cause us future business. It's that logical step thing again, right? So if you get a few of these in a row, then there's something real to it, and you can then take action to solve that issue. With regard to guests, to owner feedback, I want to know from our owners up front if they're thinking about moving, and if they are, I ask them why. That's that we do something that's kind of cool. I started a couple of years ago. It's a current year performance, next year goals, and feedback form. COVID was the first time I didn't do it in the last several years, because everything just fell off the table in Kauai and nobody had any expectations or reason to believe that anything would change. But in previous years, it's been a really cool way to go back and say, here's what we've done in the past year. And I do it in the end of the third quarter, because primarily in Kauai, by the third quarter, we know what the year is going to look like because people tend to book out, way in advance for holiday seasons and stuff. So at that point, I know what our current year performance is. I'll go back and say, here's what we did this year. And then I'll compare it to what we thought we'd do from last year, from our last year's goal setting, and say, hey, here's where we did well, or here's where we fell short. And here's why I think that. Gives us an opportunity to have a dispassionate, honest discussion about, maybe our goals weren't any good. Maybe we were way too ambitious for some reason, or, maybe the owner decided to use 4 weeks instead of 2. So we have that honest discussion, and it's not a finger pointing exercise. It's a, let's right size our expectations this next time around, and let's be on the same page. So I do that with the current performance. And then I set goals saying, I'm going to be conservative again this year because I'd rather be conservative and overshoot than be really, really aggressive and then have to explain to you why my bad choices weren't good. That's the engineer in me. I'm not primarily a sales guy. I'd rather under promise and over deliver.
Well, that's a perfect segue into our last module, my friend. Let's talk about sales. What, with regards to marketing and sales, have you learned as these two destinations have evolved?
I've learned so much about it. We've been lucky with the guest side that our mix of the quality of the website, and then now we're starting to get into some more data analytics and things like that. We've done a pretty good job of being able to stay really competitive for guests without having to spend a lot of money on guest acquisition. Like I said, we're getting more advanced in that now because the tools are there and I'm using them for other things. And now I have that available. So we're using it. But with regard to the owner acquisition, that's where it's been, kind of that's where the really special part has come out in the last couple of years. And, what I've learned is that it really pays to understand the process and then find the right people for that process to flourish. So, it's funny because a couple of years ago I sat down and I made a list because, if it's not clear at this point, I make lists, people. So I made a list of, I thought through the process. I forced myself to do a thought experiment of if I were going to just crush it, how would I go about my marketing effort? What would I do to attract guests? And I made this detailed, comprehensive list. And then I saw your podcast interview. I think it was one of your, I forget exactly what format it was, but you did an interview with Brooke Faust over at Ventori. And this was the first time I'd ever seen anybody talk about how to grow your inventory as a property manager. So I was really excited. And so I'm watching that. And as you go through and Brooke starts talking about what their strategy is, and how they grew from 0 to 500 properties in 5 years, I was shocked because he went through my list. He point by point. And then towards the end of it, he started throwing in some other things that I didn't even know about. And I thought, wow, this is the kind of thing I need, because I had identified what needed to be done. But in all honesty, like I said, I'm not a salesman. I can do some copy, but I'm not great at it. I just knew I didn't have the bandwidth to do this at the level that it needed to be done with the consistency that I needed in order to really have a solid plan for growth. And so that's what led me to Ventori. And it was through you. So I'll give you a ton of credit for that as well. That, what the fundamental process is you need to have a plan in place. You need to have a process in place. You can't just rely on luck. You can't just kind of do a postcard every third month or something like that. I mean, there are things out there that work. And when you develop a plan and it becomes a mechanized process of your operation, that's when it becomes powerful. So that's what we've done in terms of marketing to owners and realtors in a thoughtful and organized manner. And now that we have some of the other options with guests, we're getting back to the point where we're now advancing our strategy for how to go after guests and increase our listing site independence by not only diversifying the number of channels we're on, but also driving more traffic to our website.
So these are basically 3 different kinds of marketing and sales that you're doing. The first 2 are similar. One is to property owners and one is to realtors. And has that worked out for you, by the way?
For property owners, it has. For realtors, we're still trying to figure out the process because it's a different market. It's a different, I don't want to say different market. It's a different audience. That's the right word for it. Audience. Yeah. So what we're doing with what you do with realtors is you have to explain to them and help them understand, educate them really on how you are a complementary service to what they're doing. You're not a competitive one.
Right.
And
that
so we're still working out exactly how to do that and exactly how to, develop those relationships, because I hear of other people who have been able to do that successfully. And it sure sounds great to have somebody send me, 5-10 owners a year, than knowing what it's going to cost me to go out and find those 5 or 10 owners a year.
And then the third ultimate customer is the traveler, the guest. And that's kind of its own style of marketing and advertising in and of itself.
Absolutely. Again, going back to what we said earlier in the discussion, the thing that's important to an owner is different than the thing that's important to a guest. And you've got to be able to speak to those in specific ways. Focus your marketing on those needs for that audience. Because if you can't do that, you're just trying to say a general thing of, hey, we're good at this. And that means different things to different people.
And you've outlined a number of, almost all the elements of listing site independence, starting off using all the listing sites, building up an independent website, ultimately building a newsletter list, and practicing some blogging, moving into social media and search engine optimization and pay-per-click advertising. This is all still evolving, but my guess is that you, like a lot of destinations, the moment you opened up post-pandemic, you started to see bookings.
Yeah, it's been a very busy a couple of months for us. At the beginning of the year, before Kauai announced it would be rejoining Safe Travels, people were booking in higher numbers than I expected. And I kept looking at my wife, Lisa, she's our owner and business partner, and saying, these people must know something that I don't know. And I think they were booking on hope, that Kauai was going to reopen. But since the state and the county said they were going to be reopening, we've had, it's not hyperbole to say we're doing hundreds of % more bookings in terms of number of bookings, in terms of bookings per property, in terms of actual financial, the booking revenue that we're getting. It's hundreds and hundreds of % more than we were, not just for our historical projections, but if you compare it to last year, we start getting into the thousands of % better than last year. So it's insane. And I had a call with my data guy yesterday, and what we've kind of determined is that guests are also working a lot harder to find bookings right now. So, they're doing a lot of work. We're getting a ton more organic traffic to our website than we expected to based on the last couple of months. It's that guests are realizing that supply has become constricted, and they're now redoubling their efforts to find a place to go find a place in Hawaii, in Kauai specifically is what we're seeing. And it's a good time. Finally.
What's so cool to me about you, Jed, is that you represent kind of this new wave of vacation rental managers who really are going in with a plan, a very clear and efficient focus. And I think that that's just so disruptive to a company that's maybe been doing this for 10, 20 years that doesn't have some of these fundamental elements in place, especially as you begin to project out over the course of the next couple years. You, for me, represent as forward thinking and deep thinking of a vacation rental manager as exists. We've been through the first module, market analysis. The second is building blocks. The third are structural members. The fourth, our routines and procedures. The fifth, kind of the optimization, the interior design, to go back to the analogy of classing up the place with checklists and the dashboards. And ultimately, thinking about marketing and sales as comprehensively as possible. When you sent all this to me, I was like, Jed, this is more than good. This is something that we need to turn into an experience. This needs to be scaled. And my question for you is, what do you want somebody to get out of these lessons, these materials, the templates, the PDF documents, the checklist? What do you want somebody to get out of the experience of going through this learning process?
I think ultimately, our goal has always been to do good business, and we'll find the success there. I didn't come into the business either in Kauai or in Newport Beach in order to oust somebody because they were using antiquated methods. I've got a lot of respect for people who've been doing this for a lot of years, my hope with this program that we're now outlining and talking about is that it's going to increase the quality of the business being done wherever these fundamental principles are applied. And in doing that, it's going to legitimize our industry. It's going to make a sustainable long-term, it could represent a sustainable and long-term solution to what has been referenced as an ad hoc type style of management, which any of us who has been doing this for a long time knows it's not that, but it's been portrayed as that through some of the attention that the vacation rental industry has gotten over the past couple of years with some of the emergence of new booking sites, the Airbnb complaints from neighbors and stuff like that. That my hope is that anybody who wants to improve, there's something for them in this for sure. And if they've got a place that if they're existing and they want to get better, there is a good suggestion in here for that. And if they're starting out from scratch and they want to do a great job, then this is a comprehensive guidebook for that. As a matter of full disclosure, I'm not actually at all of this. These are aspirational levels for me. And for when I sat down to write this, it was, how would it be if it was perfect? And so I've got holes that I'm currently aware of and working towards this standard as well. This is not meant to be a finish line type of exercise for anybody. It's a continuous improvement exercise of how can we always get better, keep our eyes open for opportunities to get better.
Love that. If you, listener, are licking your chops right now saying, boy, I would love this material. Jed and I have put together a program that we're calling the VRMB Accelerator, which is designed to take an independent owner or manager who's either just getting started out, or as Jed mentioned, who's already been operating, wants to get more efficient to that point of precision that Jed feels like he's at right now, which is really cool. We've already begun with our first class in members of the Inner Circle. But Jed, if folks want to sign up for our waiting list, how do they get in touch with you?
Probably the best way is just to email. It's just Jed, Jed, at KoloaKai.com.
That's KOLOA?
KAI. You got it.
KOLOAKAI.com. And everybody knows me, of course. Jed, I'd just like to conclude by saying how amazing your brain is, and the way that you think as an engineer is just perfect for this kind of job. So way to go. This is absolutely fascinating stuff, and I'm loving seeing what's happening with our members.
Well, thank you very much. I will reflect back the compliment onto you and the community for being here and fostering all of this thought process. It's not all my ideas that I came up with from scratch. It's really a culmination of a lot of good advice that I've received along the way, but I appreciate your compliments. Thank you.
Yep. We should all listen to Jed's advice when it comes to growing a vacation rental business, not so much when it comes to teeth.
No, have a good plan for teeth too. It's always a good idea.
That's the big lesson you've learned.
Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly.
That was an intense interview. And if you're anything like me, you were taking frantic mental notes throughout the conversation with Jed, maybe real notes on a little notepad. And there were times where you feel like the details are too deep, like the conversation went straight above your head. And that's fine. In fact, that was me running my vacation rental business. I used my instincts to get started. I used my natural strengths in hosting guests. But eventually, I reached a moment when, without a formal plan, I was unable to grow sustainably. And I'd like to pose one really honest question to everybody who's listening. And that is, do you have a plan or a model about your business that is sound? And do you reference that model on a regular basis in order to determine the health of you and your business as you grow? Without this map and compass, it becomes very easy to just drift. And especially when times are good, when bookings are flying in, you just assume that everything is success. But without a plan in place, it becomes very easy to lose track of why we first got started And without metrics in place to determine how we are growing, it becomes easy to lose our way. If this kind of discovery question is helpful to you and you'd like to consider joining a group of the world's most proactive vacation rental professionals all under one roof, consider joining Jed and me in the Inner Circle, where we're actively solving these kinds of problems together. Inner Circle members are the first members that we're introducing to VRMB's Accelerator Program, an experimental project designed to build more sustainable vacation rental management businesses. You can sign up at community.vrmb.com. Look forward to seeing you inside.
I know it'd be more than a moment, but would we be a waste of